There are encounters that cannot be explained by logic. They do not begin with fireworks or grand promises. They begin with a quiet sensation, almost imperceptible, yet impossible to ignore. It feels as if something inside you recognizes that person before your mind has time to analyze who they are. You don't know exactly what role they will play in your life, but from the very first moment, you sense that this is not just another encounter. Carl Jung believed that nothing truly meaningful happens by chance. That every person who crosses our path arrives as a message from the unconscious. And when someone is truly meant for you, that message is not superficial. It is deep. It is transformative. And very often, uncomfortable. Because that person does not come to make you feel good all the time. They come to make you feel the truth. It is not about instant peace. It is about inner honesty. When someone is meant for you, something inside begins to unravel. Your defenses soften. Your masks weaken. You find yourself reacting in ways you don't fully recognize, saying things you usually keep hidden, feeling emotions you buried years ago. This is not coincidence. It is the unconscious recognizing itself through another soul. Jung said that what affects us most in others is not what they show, but what they reflect back to us. That is why these connections are not comfortable. They are mirrors. And not just any mirror, but one that reveals both light and shadow. There are people you can perform for your entire life. You can maintain an image, a carefully edited version of yourself. But when someone is meant for you, that performance collapses. Not because they demand authenticity, but because your soul can no longer sustain the lie. Suddenly, old insecurities resurface. Ancient fears return. Wounds you thought were healed open again. Not because that person harms you, but because their presence illuminates parts of you that were left in the dark. This is what Jung called encountering the shadow. And it hurts. It hurts because we were never taught that deep love does not always feel calm. Sometimes it feels like confrontation, like an inner disruption, like a call to grow. That is why many people confuse deep connections with suffering. But they are not the same. The pain that comes from an authentic connection does not destroy you. It reveals you. There is something strangely familiar about that person. Not because you have known them before, but because silence feels safe. Because conversation flows without effort. Because you do not feel the need to impress. There is no anxiety about being enough. No performance. Only presence. It is difficult to describe, yet easy to recognize. Like returning home to a place you have never been. Jung spoke of archetypes, deep patterns living within the collective unconscious. When someone activates those patterns within you, the connection moves beyond the personal. It is no longer just attraction or compatibility. It is resonance. And resonance is not always gentle. Sometimes it is intense. Sometimes confusing. Sometimes so deep that it frightens you. Because that person does not come to complete you. That belief is a dangerous illusion. No one comes to fill you. No one comes to save you. The person meant for you comes to awaken you. They reveal who you are when no one is watching. They confront what you avoid. They push you toward a more authentic version of yourself. And that requires loss. It requires letting go of old identities. It requires releasing patterns that once felt familiar, even if they were painful. That is why these connections often appear during moments of crisis. When something in your life no longer fits. When a chapter is ending, even if you are not ready to admit it. The unconscious knows when you are ready to change, even when you don't. And then, that person appears. Not always to stay. Not always to walk beside you for life. Sometimes their role is to break something open. To create a before and an after. Jung believed that some people arrive as catalysts. They trigger an inner reaction so powerful that once it begins, it cannot be stopped. That is why certain connections end, yet never truly disappear. Not because you still love that person, but because you are no longer the same after knowing them. They changed how you see yourself. They changed how you love. They changed how you understand your inner world. And that change is irreversible. With that person you feel seen. Not watched. Seen. As if someone could read between the lines of what you yourself cannot yet put into words. not with judgment, but with understanding. This can be terrifying, because being seen means being vulnerable. It means accepting imperfection, contradiction, shadow. But it is also deeply liberating, because for the first time, you do not have to run from yourself. And when someone is truly meant for you, you do not recognize it because everything feels easy. You recognize it because something inside you becomes honest. There are no exaggerated promises, no guarantees, only a quiet certainty. This encounter matters, and even if you do not know how long it will last, even if you do not fully understand why it arrived, something within you knows it was not an accident. As time passes, another truth becomes clear. Not everything that is deep is meant to last forever, and not everything that is brief is insignificant. When someone is meant for you, the connection is not measured by duration, but by impact, by what it awakens inside you. There is no indifference. They do not pass unnoticed. They leave a silent mark that shows up in how you think, how you feel, how you relate to yourself. After a connection like that, you can no longer love the same way. You can no longer ignore your emotions. You can no longer keep running from who you are. Jung said that what you resist persists, and what you face transforms. That is why these connections appear when you are ready, even if you don't know it, to face something within. A fear, a wound, a desire you denied. That person does not do the work for you. They simply turn on the light, and you decide what to do with what you see. They may stay. They may leave. The relationship may change form, but the awakening remains. With time, you realize it was never just about them, or just about you. It was about the meeting itself, the precise moment when two paths crossed to initiate a transformation that could no longer be delayed. And when someone is truly meant for you, you do not need external validation to understand it. You do not seek opinions. You do not ask for permission. You know it in silence. You know it in how your inner world reorganizes. You know it because after that encounter, something within you feels more real. Not easier. Not perfect. More authentic. So if you have ever experienced a connection like this, do not minimize it. Do not rationalize it until it disappears. Do not blame yourself for not understanding it at the time. Every experience arrives when it must. And if you have not yet experienced something like this, do not force it. Destined connections are not chased. They are recognized. They arrive when you have walked far enough on your own path to hold what they bring. Sometimes they arrive wrapped in love. Sometimes in loss. Sometimes in transformation. But they always arrive with purpose. And that purpose is to bring you closer to who you truly are. If this message resonated with you, if you felt it speak directly to a deeper part of you, I invite you to subscribe to the channel. Here, we explore depth psychology, Carl Jung's ideas, and the encounters that transform us from within. Subscribing is not just supporting the channel. It is choosing to continue exploring your inner world with awareness. Before you go, take a moment of silence. Breathe. Think about the people who marked your life. Not all of them stayed, but all of them brought you closer to yourself. And that was never an accident. And even after that realization settles in, the process does not end. In fact, that is often where it truly begins. Because once you have encountered a connection like this, your inner standards change. Not consciously at first, but subtly, quietly. You start to notice when something feels empty, when conversations stay on the surface, when a connection lacks depth, presence, or truth. What once seemed enough no longer satisfies you. This is not arrogance. It is awareness. Your psyche has tasted something real, and it no longer wants substitutes. Jung believed that every meaningful encounter expands consciousness. And once consciousness expands, it cannot be reduced again. You cannot unsee what you have seen. You cannot unknow what you now know about yourself. That is why after these connections, loneliness can feel different. It is no longer just the absence of another person. It is the absence of depth. You may be surrounded by people and still feel alone. Not because you are disconnected, but because you are no longer willing to live unconsciously. And this can feel isolating at first. because depth is not common. Presence is not common. Emotional honesty is not common. But this phase is not punishment. It is preparation. The psyche is recalibrating, learning what resonates and what does not, letting go of what no longer aligns with who you are becoming. Sometimes you may find yourself missing that person, even if you know the relationship could not continue. Not missing them as they were, but missing how alive you felt in their presence. This is important to understand. You are not missing the person. You are missing the part of yourself that awakened around them. And that part is not gone. It belongs to you now. Jung emphasized that projection plays a powerful role in love. We often project unconscious qualities onto others, believing they come from them, when in reality they live within us. The purpose of a destined connection is not to keep the projection alive, but to reclaim it. To realize that what you admired, what you longed for, what you recognized in the other, was also trying to emerge in you. This is why clinging leads to suffering. But integration leads to freedom. When you integrate what the connection awakened, you stop chasing the person, and start embodying the truth they revealed. And this changes everything. You become more grounded, more selective, more aligned. You no longer confuse intensity with intimacy. You no longer mistake attachment for love. You begin to value depth over drama, presence over performance, truth over illusion. This is the quiet gift these connections leave behind. And it is a gift that continues to unfold over time. Years later, you may look back and finally understand why it could not work the way you wanted. Why timing felt wrong. Why circumstances interfered. Not as a failure, but as a necessary chapter in your psychological evolution. Jung wrote that life does not ask us to be happy. It asks us to be whole. And wholeness requires encounters that challenge us, unsettle us, and transform us. That is why when someone is meant for you, the feeling goes far beyond romance. It touches identity, purpose, meaning. It feels like being pulled toward something larger than the relationship itself. And often, the deepest sign that someone was meant for you is not that they stayed, but that they led you back to yourself. More honest, more aware, more alive. From that place, future connections change. You stop looking for someone to complete you. You look for someone who can meet you where you already stand. You no longer abandon yourself to be loved. You no longer shrink to be chosen. Because you understand now that love is not meant to cost you your authenticity. And this understanding did not come from theory. It came from experience. From one encounter that mattered enough to awaken you. So if you are in the middle of a connection like this right now, and it feels confusing, intense, or uncertain, pause. Not everything meaningful is meant to be resolved immediately. Sometimes the purpose is not clarity, but consciousness. Allow yourself to feel without rushing to define. Allow the process to unfold without forcing outcomes. Trust that whatever is being awakened has value, even if the path is unclear. And if that connection has already passed, honor it, not by holding on, but by living from what it revealed. Because the truest sign that someone was meant for you is not how tightly you hold them, but how deeply they changed you. And that change stays. There is a moment, often overlooked, when the intensity fades and something quieter remains. This is where many people believe the connection is over. But in truth, this is where its meaning begins to settle. The mind wants fireworks. The ego wants confirmation. But the soul works in silence. What remains after the emotional waves pass is not emptiness. It is integration. You begin to notice subtle shifts in how you respond to the world. Old triggers lose some of their power. Reactions soften. You pause more often before acting. Not because you are detached, but because you are more present. Jung believed that psychological growth is rarely dramatic on the surface. It happens quietly, beneath awareness, shaping the way you perceive reality. And the people meant for you contribute to this shaping, even when they are no longer physically present. You may catch yourself acting with more courage than before, speaking more honestly, choosing differently, and sometimes you will wonder where this strength came from. It came from being seen, from being mirrored, from being challenged in ways that forced you to confront yourself. This is why these connections cannot be replaced. Not because no one else will ever matter, but because each one awakens a different layer of the psyche. No two are the same. Some awaken tenderness. Others awaken boundaries. Others awaken self-respect. And each awakening is necessary. There is also grief in this process. A quiet grief that does not always have a clear object. You may grieve what could have been. The conversations that never happened. The future that briefly existed in imagination. But grief is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign that something meaningful passed through your life. Jung saw grief as part of transformation, a necessary descent before integration. Without grieving, the psyche cannot fully let go. And without letting go, it cannot fully grow. This is why rushing healing often backfires. Why forcing closure feels empty. True closure is not a decision. It is a realization that arrives when the psyche is ready. And when it does, something inside relaxes. You stop replaying moments. You stop asking why. You stop needing answers from the other. Not because the questions were meaningless, but because you have absorbed what they were pointing toward. And then, something remarkable happens. You begin to feel gratitude. Not performative gratitude. Not spiritual bypassing. A quiet appreciation for the role that person played in your becoming. Even if it was painful. Even if it ended. Even if it broke you open. Jung wrote that the privilege of a lifetime is becoming who you truly are. And no one becomes themselves alone. We are shaped through encounters. Through love and loss. Through reflection and rupture. This is why it is dangerous to label people simply as right or wrong for us. Some are not meant to stay. But they are meant to pass through. They are thresholds. Crossing points between who you were and who you are becoming. When you see this, resentment loses its grip. Blame softens. The narrative shifts. You stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and begin asking, "What did this awaken in me?" This question does not erase pain, but it gives it meaning. And meaning changes everything. It transforms suffering into wisdom, loss into depth, confusion into curiosity. From this place, you approach future connections differently. You listen more. You rush less. You sense resonance instead of chasing intensity. You understand that what is meant for you does not require force. It unfolds. And when it unfolds, it feels aligned. Even when it challenges you. There is less drama, but more truth. Less urgency, but more presence. You become less afraid of endings. Because you understand that endings do not negate meaning. They complete it. This understanding brings a quiet confidence. You no longer cling to potential. You honor reality. You no longer abandon yourself for connection. You allow connection to meet you where you are. And this is the paradox. The more whole you become, the less desperate you feel for completion. Not because you do not desire connection, but because you no longer need it to escape yourself. You are at home within. And from that place, love changes form. It becomes less about validation, and more about recognition. Less about fantasy, and more about presence. And when someone truly meant for you appears from this place, the feeling is different. Still deep. Still powerful. But calmer. Clearer. It does not pull you away from yourself. It draws you further into who you are. That is how you know. And if that person does not appear yet, this is not a failure. It is an invitation to continue becoming. Because the deepest work always happens within. And those meant to walk beside you will recognize the work in your eyes. And so, in the end, what remains is not the person, not the story, not even the outcome. What remains is who you became because of the encounter. Carl Jung understood something essential about the human experience. That life is not a search for comfort, but a movement toward wholeness. And the people who are meant for you are not always the ones who stay the longest. They are the ones who touch you where it matters most. They arrive when something inside you is ready to change. They leave when that change has begun. Not as a punishment, not as a loss, but as part of the natural rhythm of transformation. When you look back one day, you may no longer remember every detail. The words, the moments, the conflicts, but you will remember how it shifted something inside you. How it made you more honest, more awake, more aligned with yourself. And that is how you will know it mattered. So if you are still holding on, hold gently. If you are still hurting, let the hurt teach you. If you are still searching, turn inward. Because the deepest connections do not pull you away from yourself. They return you to who you truly are. And when someone is truly meant for you, you will not need to chase them, convince them, or lose yourself to keep them. You will recognize them. In the quiet sense of truth they awaken within you. Not excitement, not obsession, but recognition. And once you have felt that, you will never settle for less. If this video spoke to something deep within you, take a moment before you leave. Breathe. And if you feel called to continue exploring the inner world, to understand the meaning behind human connection and psychological transformation, I invite you to subscribe to the channel. Here, we do not rush answers. We sit with questions. We explore depth. We grow through awareness. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And remember, nothing that truly changes you ever arrives by accident.